Welcome to the DaVinci Hour podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Maxwell Cooper, and in this podcast series, I interview physicians, medical innovators, and entrepreneurs making an impact on healthcare. This podcast is produced by DaVinci Academy, a multimedia medical education company that provides podcasts, video courses, and digital textbooks. You can see more on our website, www.dviacademy.com, and our YouTube channel, youtube.com/c/DaVinci Academy Med. Hey everybody, welcome back to the DaVinci Hour podcast. I'm joined this week by Dr. Rami Wehbi. He is the founder and host of the Beyond Medicine podcast and also the founder of the Beyond Medicine group, among a number of other digital health endeavors as well. So Rami, welcome to the podcast. Happy to have you here.
Maxwell, thanks so much for having me, man. I'm excited to do this with a fellow podcaster.
Yeah. I've done this, I think, like once or twice before. So it's always fun to share stories and talk shop and everything like that. So thanks for joining us. So maybe I gave you a little bit of a brief intro, but maybe give us a little more background on, what's your education, where'd you go to school, your training, and then where you are now, what kind of endeavors you're working on now.
Absolutely. Before I do that, though, I gotta say what an absolute beast you are for just pulling off an all-nighter, working an overnight shift and doing this podcast. So I remember doing that during residency as well, and just highlights your commitment. So I got to shout you out for that.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you.
So yeah, I'm my story is that I grew up in Metro Detroit. I went to Michigan State for medical school. I went on to do my training in family medicine. I was in Worcester, just outside of Boston in Worcester, a really cool town, very diverse. I got a really great experience there. And really after residency training, I moved back to Michigan. I sort of always, I guess to give some context to all of this, during medical school, I started one of the first medical podcasts. So in 2017, I was studying for my step 2 exams, and I was listening to the Golgin. I don't know if you've heard of Golgin. Yeah, Golgin. Yeah. So I was listening to them off like some website. I don't know if it was like bootleg or not. I'm sorry if it was Golgin. But it was just, like audio off of a website. And I was, I would fill my time commuting, listening to these lectures. And at the time I had been doing this Instagram blog. So I started like documenting my journey in medical school. I was sort of one of those, like the first really Instagram influencer, really. Like I started doing this super early, before like all the influencers you see now. And there was like maybe 5 other doctors that I remember that were doing this too at the time. And so I started using hashtags on my Instagram, and like putting med student and medical student. All of a sudden, I'm doing this blog and posting pictures and like in the hospital. Nothing goofy, like I wasn't doing dances and stuff, but just like, documenting what I was doing. And all of a sudden I've got like 20,000 or 15,000 followers. And it's mostly pre-medical students. And this is like, once again, this is like I started that in 2015, I think. And then as I was listening to the Golgin lectures, and then I was like, this is kind of interesting. Why isn't there more content that I can just listen to on the go that helps me study? I'm looking at my Instagram, like I have a bunch of doctors on my Instagram. Why don't I just like call them up and record and see like if we can learn something from each other? And then I'm looking through my phone and I see this weird looking app that says podcast. And it's like, what is this thing that I never use? So I look through it. I'm like, I gotta figure this out. I think there's something here. And then also the last piece of the puzzle was, I had just gotten a new car at the time, and I'd plug my phone into my car, and the dashboard of your phone would come up, like you could see the apps. And I had like this, like it was like everything came together. I was like, I see the future. This is the Netflix of radio. Podcasts are the Netflix of radio. This is how content's going to be consumed. People are going to do this in their car all the time. Once the integration gets a little bit better, the technology gets more advanced, this is going to be the thing. So I was like, all right, that's it. I'm going all in, starting a podcast. So this is, nearing my 4th year. I put all my future vacation money into putting this podcast together. I brought on a bunch of pre-medical students that were basically interns with me. And we just launched it. We sent out like a bunch of shirts to a bunch of people that I was connected to on my Instagram. And really it took off from there because it was the first podcast in medicine. I think there was actually another podcast by a friend of mine, Frank Cusimano. I don't remember the name of his podcast, but he was doing this too at the time.
Yeah, I think I've
Yep.
heard of that podcast too. That's
Yep.
awesome. So like, yeah, you really were like a trailblazer in a way, because now I mean, I feel like every day I'm seeing a new like med student or resident like influencer out there or podcaster. And so you were a man ahead of your time for sure.
It was early because I remember my first few guests, I had to explain what a podcast was. And they're like, "What's that?" And I'm like, "We're just gonna record, and then the audio will go up." And it was a really cool thing. It was I learned a lot doing it, and it was fun because you get to talk with your colleagues, and it's a way to talk to people and get to know people and build relationships, which is what I really valued from it. But fast forward, I did this throughout residency. Not great. I tried to do my best because obviously residency is hard. And then after that, I actually left my residency after my second year. So I did 2 years of training. And after my second year, I sort of knew I was going to go into a non-clinical career path, and I wanted to go into the business development side of things and maybe pursue an MBA or something. So I got super burned out in residency. It's kind of a longer story, but I was a transfer student. So then, I needed to do an extra year to meet my graduation requirements. And I was like, I'm going to go do something else for a little bit. If I figured if I want to come back, I can come back in the future. And that was really the start of a really whole new career path and trajectory for me. And it's been a really fun learning experience. And I've got to learn a bunch of new skills as I've sort of embarked on this new endeavor. But to give you some added context here, I got my license. So I was, obviously able to moonlight during the residency training, but I moved back to Michigan, started working in urgent care part-time, and I started actually building a business around my podcast and turned it into a media company essentially. And that media company we would do productions with biotech and biopharma companies, tell their stories, really do high-end productions for them and sell them as packages. So that was fun for a little bit. It was a great learning experience, but it wasn't a great business model. Margins weren't great, and it was very capital intensive. And so that led me to my next opportunity, which was working in startups. And so I got recruited to join a startup here in Austin, Texas. And I was basically a growth director for them. And that was a really, really awesome learning experience because I saw like the inside of a startup, what it takes, what it looks like, how you raise capital, how you work in a hierarchy, how you work in teams, how you achieve your goals, how you set benchmarks. It opened up my eyes to a whole new world. And ever since then, I've been doing advising. I work as an advisor for several startups now. And then I do some fractional consulting, which is really fun. And then I got the BMG group, which I started in Beyond Medicine. So that's in a nutshell my story.
Awesome. Thanks for giving that overview. Definitely want to get more in depth on some of those aspects. I kind of initially want to talk about the podcast a little bit. So you kind of hit on like why you started. What type of guests did you have? And I imagine maybe that's evolved over time, like what type of guests you've had. And like, it sounds like your audience at first was maybe just people in healthcare, maybe med students, and then maybe that has evolved as well. And then what kind of like unique opportunities, and I think you touched a little bit on this, like what unique opportunities have you seen coming out of that podcast as well?
So the interesting thing was because I had the Instagram and I was connected with sort of these other medical influencers, really the strategy was we interview the medical influencers that have like 100,000 followers and 150,000 followers, and we'd create great content for them. And I had a team of 7 interns working with me doing this. So we'd create some amazing content for them, and we'd send them it, and then they'd post it on their socials and post links to our podcast. And somehow like that ended up being the holy grail of how to grow a podcast, because their whole audience would be getting this amazing content from someone their followers are there for them, right? And I'm giving them a spotlight to showcase themselves, talk about things in a way they may not have heard, their audience may not have heard them talk about things, right? And so we just started pulling in followers from our guests' audiences. And so that was really how I started. And it was fun for me because I'd get to talk with other doctors really about the cool things they were doing, how they built their followings, how they're utilizing it and just learning from that. And then there's network effects that came from that.
That's awesome. Yeah, I found podcasting to be a very good networking tool. Initially, and I kind of interviewed like really basically my friends. Was kind of the OG, like first 10 episodes is basically like people that were friends of mine. They're also physicians, but
those are the best conversations though.
Yeah, they were very like, unscripted, and like I don't even know if I wrote any questions for them or not, like just because like I knew these guys, and so like I knew what to ask them and stuff like that. And yeah, we had some cool like we had one on like one of the first ones was like how to transition from med school to intern year. Another one was like how to pick your specialty. And then it's kind of evolved into like a lot of the guests I have now, I've never met before in my life, maybe, done some email exchanges and things like that. But so it's a really cool way to network and meet new people. I'm curious, did your podcasting lead to any of these like digital health opportunities or advising opportunities you've had?
Absolutely. Almost all of them. Actually, my first full-time role as a director was through the podcast. Met a woman, a very nice woman, Ruby, from MDisrupt, and we had a great conversation. And after that, she was like, "Hey, you're great at speaking, and I think you'd be really good for us in this role." And went on from there, and it was pretty cool. Like it really did. And I had a lot of other opportunities that I really didn't take through the podcast, but if you bring people value and you're curious and you're interested and you're really there to help them, I think people appreciate that, and it goes a long way, especially for networking.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm curious so you did the podcast, you've kind of developed these new opportunities, you were doing this, like juggling this during residency. I'm curious, maybe give us a little bit of background on like what kind of led to that decision to leave clinical medicine. Obviously it sounds like you did it still a little bit after leaving, which is kind of interesting. But I imagine that was not a decision made, overnight. That was kind of a culmination of things.
That was a decision I made almost 4 different times throughout my medical journey. So the first time was probably during medical school, where I think in my second year or something, I had a real epiphany of like, oh my gosh, what did I get myself into? I thought this was something else. I didn't know this is what I signed up for. And, like at that point you're in too deep and you're just like, shoot, what do I do? And I remember this feeling I had. I was doing a preceptorship with a primary care doctor, and she was really miserable. And then like I had a second preceptorship a couple of weeks after that. And then the gentleman that was the physician in that practice was also miserable. I'm like, what the heck is going on here? Why is everybody so miserable? Like, why are people not happy in their jobs? Why are they so cynical? And I just didn't get it. And then, you go into your clinical years as a third and fourth year, and, like the themes really didn't change that much. I don't know if it's because I was in Detroit or not, but, you'd come across maybe 10%, it was like 20% of docs are really happy, really thriving. And then there's the others that are really not. And I started to I wonder if I'm going to be one of those that are really not happy, because, I found that the doctors that were really happy, like you could tell this was their calling, right? These were the docs that lived and breathed medicine. When they talk about, a study, or like they'd light up, right? And I was like, oh shit, that's not me. So I had that realization early on. And so, actually, I contemplated leaving actually after medical school, but then I realized my degree is useless if I don't at least do 1 year of residency or 2 years of residency in some states. So I was like, dang, I probably should at least get my license, so it's not a complete waste. And so I went on to do an intern year in Pennsylvania in a rural program. I did that first year, and after my first year, I was like, all right, I'm leaving after this. So I put in my resignation actually after my first year, and then I got cold feet as I neared that end of the first year. I got cold feet, and I thought maybe it's just this program. Maybe like I need to go to a better program. Maybe if there's somewhere else I go that's better, I'll feel differently. And so I went through a very difficult process to do this. It was not easy to transfer out of a program, by the way. I don't know if this is a whole nother topic we can maybe talk about another time.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. We've had a couple of, cause we have one of the largest radiology residencies in the country. And so we've had a number of people kind of transfer in and out. And I know people have done that process and they say exactly the same thing you're talking about. It's a very arduous process. You need like the stars to
yeah, it's a
align
very
and think,
political process. It's very hard to net. It's like playing chess. It's like it's a very political sort of process, and you have to navigate it. You have to be very careful how you navigate it. So anyways, I was able to transfer to a really great program right outside of Boston at UMass, probably one of the best family medicine programs in the country, in my opinion. And I had the best mentors. I had like really great experience there. I learned so much, but I was so behind because I went from a program that was rural and a small community program that was like their second year ever opened, and didn't really learn much there. And so I go to this new program and I'm like, I just went from little league softball to Major League Baseball overnight. And I was out of my element for sure. So I spent that whole year. I was like, man, I have to catch up to these people. I have to get on their level. I have to get, my co-residents were from Harvard and BU. And I was like, I'm just barely, I might've graduated last in my medical school. I don't know. Like I'm not on the same level as these guys. So I busted my butt trying to catch up and really trying to learn as much as I could and become a good physician, and just from a knowledge base, and busting my butt for that year. And then COVID hit, and then just burned myself out because I was working 80 hours a week, but also on top of that studying all the time so I could get on everybody else's level, and just burned myself out to a crisp. On top of that, my credits didn't really transfer fully. So, I had to do another year, and I was like, can I do another year and a half of this? I was like, I don't think so. Not just for a piece of paper, because I knew at the end of it, I was probably going to go and get either my MBA or work in startups or, double down on my business. And I was already making some money from the podcast that I was doing throughout residency. So I also had an exit. Like I sort of planned out an exit. I knew I could pay my rent if I did this. It was a very, very difficult decision to make. And, it took me a whole year, probably. It took me a whole year after that to really come to terms with it and get over the insecurity that comes with, not doing that or not getting board certified. And, once my identity changed around really what I do, I think it's become like, now I know where I fit in, now I know what I do. And I don't have that same sort of obscurity. But yes, it was a planned process. I think that there obviously it shouldn't have to be so hard for other doctors, right? There should be off ramps at certain stages of medical training. Like there really should be an off ramp right after medical school. You shouldn't have to graduate medical school with a useless degree, right? That's something we got to figure out. Like our ACGME, we have to do better, because there's some people that it's just not for them. And they spent $300,000 on a medical degree and, they got nothing to show for it. And there's tons of students that go unmatched every year with nothing to do. They got to go do research, get paid a minimum wage job. And these are full-fledged physicians at this point. And, if you look at our counterparts, if you look at nurse practitioners and PAs with, obviously less experience and less training, they're able to go into practice. They're working under other doctors. They have horizontal movement that can go from one specialty to another. But our culture of medicine holds us to unbearable standards. And I think that's a real conversation that needs to be had. But maybe that's also another podcast. But anyways, there should be off ramps, medical school, year 1, year 2, like, a path to being a general practitioner or a path to business and healthcare innovation, that sort of thing. Because I know I'm not alone here. I know, and I've had a lot of students and residents reach out to me after this, or from knowing my story, that just come to me seeking guidance or advice in how to navigate this process. And it's hard for a lot of people.
Yeah, definitely. It's one thing I was thinking of recently is, like the 4th year of med school is such a wash, because, you're applying for a residency, you're, maybe taking your step 2. If you're doing one of the competitive specialties, you got to do away rotations. And then, a lot of people, the classic is, oh, I'm going to do, pathology and hang out, or like, I'm going to travel or do whatever, and try and graduate as early as, or finish as early as possible. but you just spent, 30, 50, $60,000. I mean, that's a pretty expensive like hangout year, there's,
Yeah,
and so I feel like
great point.
this fourth year, it would be so much better if schools offered like not so much like making you do stuff in the hospital, but do stuff like that's outside the hospital. Like maybe go do a 1 month internship with a, startup or a venture capital firm that focuses on like healthcare or
Yeah,
something like that, or just
yeah.
to even open your eyes to that and make
I don't
connections.
think they want that. I don't think they don't. I don't think they want doctors discovering other paths, because once you do, it makes clinical medicine seem a little bit unappealing. In all honesty, because there are a lot of other opportunities in these spaces, and you can do really well financially, especially as a physician. And so I don't, with the shortage of doctors, and I don't think it'll be in the best interests of them. I think they keep us a little bit, what's the right word? Sheltered for on
Yeah.
purpose.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely. It's interesting. I don't know if you know Naveen Goyal at all. I just had him on
yeah,
the podcast recently.
great guy.
He's an awesome guy. He was an anesthesiologist for a long time. Now he's a venture capitalist, and he's very, very happy. He kind of had the similar story to you. Practice and then ended up leaving. And he says it just got to the point. What he's realized since leaving is, even he was in cush specialties, as we say
Yeah,
in medicine and anesthesiology, but he was like, we still work, even if you're in a cush specialty, you still work a lot harder than most people realize in most average jobs. And I think that's true. I mean, even like, I'm training to do interventional radiology, but I'm also getting boarded in diagnostic radiology as a part of that. And the diagnostic radiologist during the day, like it is very busy. Like people
yeah,
think, oh, we're just sitting drinking coffee. Like, sure, we work, 8 to 5, on diagnostic rotations, but like, especially like where in my program, we are reading studies like pretty much nonstop. Like, I mean, it
yeah,
is, it is not like we're hanging out.
yeah.
And obviously like other specialties, it's the similar type of thing. But like, I guess my point with this is to kind of echo what you're saying, is that we work a lot harder than we even realize, like compared to what other opportunities are out there.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Well, because here's the thing. I went and worked in an urgent care after this, because I had to pay my bills while I was building this other business. Oh my gosh, because I would go into the urgent care at 8 o'clock, and I'd leave by like 7 o'clock, and then I'd still have notes to do after that. And so, like, you think about your hourly rate plus all the hours you spend afterwards, plus the lack of energy in it, you have to do anything else after those days. Like sometimes it takes me a whole day to recover after that, right? And like how many hours are you really working, right?
Right.
Because
Right.
even if those hours you spend outside recovering, if you're not able to function after that, like for ER docs, this is, I think, more of a reality, because a one ER shift will like knock you out for 3 days, right? And it's exhausting. So like what your recovery time, like what's your real hourly rate, right? Like how many hours are you really spending in your job? You get paid a salary and it converts to an hourly rate if you were working 40 hours a week, but most doctors are working 60 or 80. So you really should, divide up your hourly rate and see what that actually is based on how many hours you're working.
No, 100%. And then, like you were talking about as residents, we all have to study, we're learning all of this, and I'm finding this as I go through, I don't think it's as bad as when you're a med student, where like you don't see everything on the floors or the rotations that are on the tests or that you need to know necessarily. But in residency, like you don't see, like I'm, 2 years into or in my second year radiology residency, I did a year internship. I haven't seen it. There's a lot of things, and we're at a very high volume, center with a lot where we see a wide variety of pathology.
Yeah.
And, so I have to study, like supplement what I'm seeing and, help make myself better clinically. And, it's the same, you were in family medicine, it's the same kind of thing. You don't necessarily see like every single case that you need to see or need to know. And so you factor that in, and then it's like, forget it on how much, what we're getting paid per hour. It's not even worth calculating, because it'll just make you so sad.
Yeah, as a resident, it is very, very sad. It's not survivable, honestly, especially now with inflation and like who's had an adjustment in their resident salaries, right? Like, it's really ridiculous. There's no reason any resident should be getting paid less than 100K. I really don't think there's any reason for that.
No, I agree with that, especially when you consider like, especially upper level residents. I mean, I mean, you got like surgery residents in their PGY 5 or 6 year, and like they're basically doing the whole case. I mean, everyone's seen that in med school, or like, and you see these attendings. I can't imagine what some of them are billing. They're running 2 or 3 rooms, and they're maybe scrubbed in on one, and they don't even see the patient on the other two. I mean, yet, but they're billing full for that. I mean, they wouldn't be able to do that without a resident. And like to your point with a nurse, you can't do that with a nurse practitioner.
Right.
A nurse practitioner can't operate like that. So it's just insane to me. Some of the economics of this.
There's an interesting culture in startups that differs. I think that would be really helpful for the culture of medicine, because in startups, when you go and start a company and you raise capital from VCs or angels or whatever it is, the VCs expect you as the founder or the CEO or the co-founder of that company to pay yourself a salary that you will live comfortably on, that you won't have to worry about your bills, that you won't have to worry about things that come up if your car breaks down. They want you to pay yourself not an exorbitant amount of money, but enough to pay your bills and get by and not have to think about money. Because their mindset, the VC's mindset, is we want you focused on this business 150%. We don't want you thinking about anything else. Your job is to go and run this company and make it successful. So, a lot of VC backed founders, CEOs are making like, they'll pay themselves $100K, $120K, enough to comfortably get by, comfortably pay their bills, and not have to think about that. And that's really, really smart. And one of the things I've thought about a lot is, why isn't that the same logic applied to residents? You expect them to go and, work all the 80 hours a week. They can barely afford a gym membership, right? Like pay your rent, afford a gym membership. Affording a gym membership, that's like a luxury, right? Because you calculate everything out, especially now with all of this inflation. There's not a lot left over for you to really survive.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess kind of segueing on that a little bit, I'm curious, how did you get into digital health? Because I know I've listened to some of your podcast episodes and some of the variety of guests you've had on, and I know that's like a big passion of yours. How did you get interested in that, and like what particular areas are you kind of working on that you're excited about?
Yeah, so it really stemmed actually from the podcast, because I was trying to figure out really what am I interested enough about, who do I want to talk to, and I realized I want to talk to business leaders. I want to know how they built their companies, and I want to know what their companies do. And I actually interviewed a company, and then after that interview, became an advisor for that company while I was still in Boston. And then I realized, like, I think I can do more of that. Like, I can interview these founders and CEOs and help them with certain things. And one of the first things I started helping with was marketing. Actually, how do you market to physicians? How do you enter the market? And then another part of that was how do you actually build the product that works for doctors? And so there's this one messaging platform that was trying to get into the healthcare sector, and they wanted to sell to primary care physicians. And so I worked with the partnerships department and was looking at their marketing material, and I'm like, you can't sell this way, right? And I sent them back a full like list of changes they should make, and they were like, wow, that was really helpful. Can you do more of this for us? And that was really my first path into a advisory thing. I didn't know this was a thing, right? And so that was really where where it kind of sparked my interest. I realized I could either get paid for this or get equity in a company by doing this, and I just doubled down on it. And I think it was a very natural gravitation for me, because I just really was interested, really curious. And I just kind of kept following that curiosity, and I talked to more founders, more CEOs. And I think they can hear it, right? I think when you're talking with someone and they hear like your questions, the way you ask the question, your attention to certain things they say or do, and they see that as valuable, because I don't think a lot of physicians have that mindset of thinking about things from a business perspective, or having that innovative mindset where it's like, oh, here's the opportunity, or here's what you're missing, and here's some constructive things we can do to get to the next step. And I felt like that kind of came quite naturally for me.
Yeah, that's interesting. And Naveen talked about something similar when I was interviewing him, is that physicians obviously are very highly capable people, but they, especially earlier on, they may not have the confidence, especially outside of the clinical realm, to put themselves out there or really fully realize their value. And so I guess based on that, what is your advice? Because I imagine you get asked this a lot. Like, what is your advice for finding those opportunities and then convincing people because unless they offer it to you, sometimes you kind of have to
Yeah.
put yourself out there a little bit and say,
Yeah.
hey, like I can offer this that would be very valuable. Clearly, like that example you gave with the messaging company.
Yeah. That's a great question. Actually, this comes up a lot in the group that I have. So yeah, it's a process. Actually, this is a process I've sort of learned how to replicate. But to answer the first question, so the confidence thing, right? I think that's a really important point, because as a physician, you have so much experience, you have so much clinical knowledge, you know the landscape, you know how things work, you know how the EMRs work, you know how things integrate together, you know how the teams work together. You have so much experience and knowledge. It's unbelievable how valuable that can be to a company. But the hard thing is the companies don't know what they don't know, right? So they can't see behind the curtain, right? I call it a curtain. And I learned this with the first company I advised for, because this is a $1 billion tech company. And they're asking me questions that I am like, are you like, this is so obvious. What do you mean? What are you doing? Right. And that was really my first like aha moment, and where I was like, holy crap, this is a big deal. Like they really have no idea what they're doing. And this is a company with billions of dollars. So the part of it is, how do you tell the company? How do you get the company or the team you're working with to know and understand deeply what they don't know? And that's where the confidence and the sales parts comes in. Because if you are just a clinician and you just have a bunch of knowledge, but you don't know how to sell yourself or know how to talk and show people your value, then it's useless, right? You have to be able to speak and market yourself and show people, this is my value and this is what I'm worth and this is why you need me. And so there is a strategy that I actually teach in the group. We call it a consulting playbook of how to do this. And it's actually something I'm more formally putting out to the community. But for me, it looks something like a 3-step process, or I'd call it maybe more of a 4-step process, where, you have that intro call, and really you just start, that's where you really want to learn and hear and listen and pick apart what they're doing and understand that, like that first call is for understanding. That second call is maybe like going into a little bit more depth or nuance. Maybe you've done some research after and have more questions. That's usually how it goes for me. That third call, I'm delivering some kind of value, like some kind of nuggets, and saying like, what can I do to help? How is this? How are we thinking about this? And as typically around that third or fourth call, I'm saying something along the lines of like, here's what I think we need to do. It sounds like what you're telling me is this. Here's what I think you really need. And here's how we do it. Here's my, this is what I can commit to helping you achieve that goal. And here's my, let's create a formal agreement to do this. And, it's gotten to the point where it's more intuition now. I'm really looking for verbal cues, body language, seeing how they're feeling about what I'm saying. And it's a lot of selling. It's a lot of sales, but I use what I'm good at, and I use what I know, and I don't try to know things I don't know. And as long as I can convey the value, I think, the partnerships and consulting agreements make sense for these startups. But to actually find these opportunities, that's where people struggle, right? How do you get in? How do you find the right people to talk to? And that's why I started Beyond Medicine Group. It's all about the networking, and that's really what the group is for, to kind of bring doctors in touch with some of these founders and investors that are giving them really the opportunities.
That's awesome. Now, have most of these opportunities been in the digital health space? Is that, or has it been like medical devices or pharma or anything like that, or has it mainly been digital health?
For me, it's been mainly digital health. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you a little bit about that for the people who maybe not, it's a kind of a buzz term thrown around. How would you define digital health? And I guess what areas do you particularly think you see making like a major impact in the kind of the near future here?
Yeah. I would define digital health as a tool that can be utilized digitally to enhance care for patients, right? And there's different kinds of digital health. It's a very broad term. It's not a really good term. I think a lot of people have trouble with this term. I do too. Because because it's so broad, really. Like it can be a lab testing kit, it can be an at-home lab kit, it can be a tech-enabled service. So a tech-enabled service is what you hear about when you hear like companies like what's a common one people know, like Cerebral or Teladoc or Amwell, right? These are tech-enabled services. So they have a platform, but they utilize physicians and nurse practitioners and PAs, people to do service, but it's through a platform. And so that's one way to define digital health. I would, I guess, yeah, that is a digital health company, but there's so many others out there too. Apple is a digital health company, and Whoop is a digital health company, and there are a lot more. And there's a bunch of digital health that are doing integrations and AI and ML and just integrations that go into your EHR and those kinds of things. Those are classified as digital health. So it's not really a great term to define the broad kind of things that we plug into it. But I think as far as like just defining what it is, I think that's sort of in the realm of how I define it.
No, I think that's a great, it's kind of an umbrella term. I think that was a great kind of synopsis of what it is. I guess, the other thing is like telemedicine. I think you'd probably classify as digital health as well. I mean, that with COVID has, just exploded. And I remember seeing an interview with Eric Topol a while ago, many years ago now, where he was like talking about prescribing apps to patients, which I thought was just so wild, like to help with, compliance or monitoring their heart rate or things like that. And so it's just amazing how much, and I almost feel like it's underutilized. Like, I don't think it's, I don't think it's used enough. I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, telemedicine is really interesting. Obviously with COVID, it's become much more commonplace. And I think there's a silver lining to the pandemic in that it's really accelerated telemedicine and digital health and ulterior forms of care. And I think that it's just enabling what people want now. Really, I think that's all it is. It's finally caught up. Telemedicine, though, is interesting because, well, there's a lot I could say about this, but I think we're going back now where I think a lot of companies are realizing that hybrid really is the true kind of direction of where things will go in the future. So it won't be all virtual, but virtual will be sort of a value add to existing practices, to existing in-person practices. It'll be like things are going to blend together. Like we went super extreme telemedicine, virtual only, because we really had to. And now things will come back to the center a little bit more, and it'll be both. And I think that'll be the really cool part. And so I look at like the development of telemedicine and digital health in like sort of three iterations. And that first iteration was the Teladocs and the Amwells, which is really the first tech-enabled service telemedicine company. And these are early, like 2012, 13, 14, like they started early on. And there were some OGs in that category, physicians that really started this. And they've been preaching this long before the pandemic. And that was the first iteration of telemedicine. And the second iteration, I think, is really what just happened now with the pandemic, where it became more fragmented and more problem focused. So you had the testosterone replacement company, the ADHD company, and the diabetes company, and the like they became really focused and narrow and niche. And I think right now what we'll probably see over the next year and a half is a lot of those companies that raised seed funds, there's a lot of money that went out into these companies over the last year and a half. Probably over the next year and a half, a lot of them will die out or there will be consolidation where they'll be acquired by some bigger companies. And the ones that don't will probably not be able to raise maybe like a Series A fund and continue on, because the money's going to dry up and the margins are really, really bad for a lot of these companies. And there's probably not a path to profitability for a lot of them. And so that'll be like the end of the second iteration. And then I think the next phase will be this third iteration of digital health and telemedicine. And that'll look more, I think this is just a prediction, more community focused and more integrated, more hybrid community focused and integrated into physical locations.
That's really interesting. And I think couple of interesting points there. One, on like the number of startups that are kind of exploding in these kind of niche areas. I think another example of that is there's an attending I work with here at Emory that's very involved. He runs like an AI research lab. So he gets approached by, these AI startups all the time, and he consults for some of them. And he was telling me, there's something like 600 or 700 like radiology only AI companies. It's insane. And he's like, only a small fraction of these are really going to make it. He's like, because it's exactly what you're talking about. It's hard for a number of reasons to sometimes convince the health systems of the value of these, to make, how do you actually make money? What are you charging for? Because these people, it's so new and abstract to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And then, being so focused, like, some algorithms are the lung nodule algorithm, or one's the stroke algorithm, or things like that. And it's become, as you said, very fragmented. So I think, and he's kind of said some similar things, that it's, what you see in the future is kind of probably, fusing a lot of these algorithms together is kind of be the new wave as far as that goes, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah, I think so too. I think there'll be a lot of consolidation. It's already happening. There's going to be a lot of consolidation over the next year and a half. And it'll be for the better. I think that some of these companies really just don't need to exist. We don't need a million solutions. We just need, one or two good ones. And enough competition in the marketplace to bring costs down. But it's funny, because really what is the most interesting part is all of these tech-enabled services, all they are is a way for clinicians, doctors to see patients, right? And it's a way to deliver care. And so they're all also competing for the same limited number of people. And a lot of the company, one of the big things that companies are actually looking for when they acquire another company is who has the physicians. If you have the physicians, are they credentialed with you? That becomes a huge value add, because that's the scarce resource. And who gets to, where do physicians put their loyalty? Where are they committed? And we're making those decisions. Doctors are making those decisions based on how good is your experience with this company? How are you getting paid? Do you enjoy them? Do you like the mission? Are you treated well? Right. And so a lot of the digital health companies and the telemedicine companies are missing an important piece of the puzzle here of like, what's the clinical experience? What's the clinician experience? And, they're really the most valuable asset you have as a company, because they're your product, really.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's because you have to know the end user. Like I've talked to people that work in medical device, and I work on some medical device stuff as well here at Emory and Georgia Tech. And, people want, and even the engineers, because the engineers, they know way better than we'll ever know the inner workings of all these different technologies or devices or whatnot. But knowing how to actually apply it, because so many people the problem is what I've seen is people develop these new technologies, but they don't necessarily have the best solution. Like they're not targeting it at the best solution in the world.
Right.
And so I think that's where you make a great point, because the clinical insight kind of helps direct that much more. Because if you're on the ground, or you've had experience being on the ground, seeing patients, where those pain points are.
Yeah. It's funny. I was once drawing up like this sort of mind map exercise of how to explain this concept. And in startups, in the startup world, we have a term called product market fit, which is really just, you've got this prototype that you've created, and there's a market out there that you're trying to get into. And when you reach product market fit, it's supposed to mean you've reached like, this is what the market wants. This is what people are asking for. It's in super high demand and you don't have enough of it, right? And you're scrambling to now scale. Like if you've done that as a company with a prototype, you've quote unquote reached product market fit. And there's an interesting thought that I've had around the clinical side of things, of like product clinical fit. How does this fit into the clinical setting? How does this product or service or integration or whatever really, really fit into the ecosystem of healthcare? How does it fit into the workflow of doctors and nurses and PAs and et cetera? And how does it fit into the workflows of even the patient? And so so that's where the physicians come in and helping reach that actual product clinical fit. And this is a term I've made up, but maybe I should coin it or something.
No, I really like that term a lot. I think it's more specific and it's so simple, but it really illustrates what we're trying to get at here. And I think, another interesting, and I've seen this a lot in digital health, is I remember one of the most shocking things to me when I was a third year med student doing rotations was the amount of non-compliance among patients, with medications or things like that. And, I've since learned that there's obviously a number of like socioeconomic factors that can play into that, or other issues that play into that. And in addition to just, people not taking their meds for whatever reason. And obviously that's very frustrating, whatever the cause is for the physician, especially, I'm preaching to the choir, I'm sure, in primary care, where that's, something you deal with on almost a daily basis. But I think this is like an example where digital health has really played an interesting role. And that's where, because I'll tell people that outside of medicine, and they just assume like, oh, everybody takes their meds. Oh, everybody goes to physical therapy when they're supposed to, and like does this and does that. And like the fact of the matter is, they don't, as you know very well. And so I think even having that, as you say, like kind of revealing behind the curtain, even pain points that people wouldn't realize at all.
Yeah. It's interesting. Doctors know the pain points better than anyone. Clinicians, most clinicians do. And I say doctors because that's who our community is. We really are the subject matter experts, but there's also nurses and physical therapists and OTs and all of that also have a lot of very specific knowledge that is useful for digital health on their side of things, right? So it's not just doctors, but it's really the whole spectrum of the clinical team. Even case managers and social workers, really a lot can be done in that category too. But yeah, we know the users of the system, right? The participants, we know the problems really, really well. And what's interesting is, if you were to take all the clinicians out of the system and make them all entrepreneurs, we would solve 99% of the problems much faster, much cheaper, much more efficiently than any of these entrepreneurs. But what we don't know is obviously how to build a company, how to run a team, how to raise capital, how to do work, et cetera, et cetera. That's where these are the health tech builders. That's where they come in, but they're building solutions for things they don't fully understand, right? So a lot of times what ends up happening, there's either some serendipitous moment or connection where there's a physician that meets a friend that's really well versed in building companies, and the physician's telling them about this problem that they have, and the entrepreneur is like, oh my gosh, I think we can create a solution here. Those companies, I've seen a few of these scenarios, those end up doing really well when there's a clinical leader and an entrepreneur that come together and go to solve something. Those companies do the best because what they're solving, there's someone that knows exactly what they're solving, and there's an entrepreneur, someone with some experience that knows how to build this, how to raise capital, how to build a team. The ones that do really bad are physicians that go start companies. As a future investor, I will not invest in any of those companies because unfortunately doctors don't know how to run businesses or how to run an efficient business. And I know this might sound bad for a lot of physicians that maybe are listening, but it's not a bad thing. I think it's just you need to know what you're good at and what you're not good at. And you need to not have any insecurity or entitlement around that, because if you really want to build a solution, you also need to know what you don't know. You need to also know that maybe you need to partner with someone that knows what they're doing and has done this before successfully. The last thing you want to do, and I've seen a lot of doctors do this, is spend tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars building a prototype without do it yourself and think you're just going to do that and put a prototype out in the market and it's going to take off. Horrible idea. Please do not do that. If you do want to do that, the best way is maybe get into a community like Beyond Medicine Group or Health Tech Nerds or something. Start networking with developers and with business leaders, and go through an accelerator or go through just don't do it alone.
It's funny. A lot of what you're saying is Mark Cuban said the exact same thing when I interviewed him.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I haven't had a chance to listen to that, but that's next on my list.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely let me know what you think. It was interesting talking to him because, we talked a lot about his online pharmacy company, but then also at the end, I was just curious, he's invested in so many different companies and things like that. And, talking about, and he's like, man, physician entrepreneurs and he said inventors too are he's like, they're two of the worst people to like run businesses because
Really?
yeah, that's literally what he says. And he was like, he did not hold back at all. And he was
Oh
like,
my God, that's so funny.
he's like, inventors, all they want to do is like do their devices and like, work on their prototypes and all that stuff. And they don't really care about the business. And then physicians, exactly what you're saying. They think they know everything. They don't want to listen to anybody. They think they know best.
Yeah.
So I asked him all, I said, Mark, I said, what? I said, have you worked with any that are any good? Like, and if yes, like, what have you noticed? And he said exactly what you're talking about. He goes, they're the ones that know what they don't know. They're the ones that partner, that don't necessarily have to be the CEO, that maybe they're the chief medical officer and they bring someone else, like a business background person, to be the CEO. And it's exactly what you're talking about. And so it just makes sense. I mean, it's just like taking care of a patient. Like, you're not going to see a nephrologist try to do neurosurgery, or something like that. Like there's all this there's a reason why you have or you wouldn't as a doctor try to do the legal side of it, because you have no idea, like, on some of that aspect.
It's a it's crazy. Yeah. And working in startups, really, I think that's where I learned this, and working as an advisor to physician run companies is very different than working as an advisor to non-physician run companies. So, like, you want to give people the hard truth, and you want to tell them, like, because you don't want them to waste time and money on something that is going to fail. And you can, like, at this point, I can see it a mile away, I think, with some founders, especially in the startup world, and you really do have to know what you don't know, and you really need to not have ego around that, because the entrepreneurs have gone through, you've gone through 12 years of training. The entrepreneurs have gone through 12 years of failure, right? They've gone through all of the failure, the mishaps, the pain, the struggle that goes into building a company. They have no entitlement. They know what it takes to get something to be profitable. You can't learn that overnight. You have to experience it, and you need someone with that experience. And for even some first-time entrepreneurs, like, a lot of them sometimes do well, but they go through an accelerator and they have an advisory board of 8 other entrepreneurs. They're never doing it alone, right? They're doing it with a lot of support, and they're doing it full time. They're not doing this like practicing 3 days a week, and they're doing this 100 hours a week, and this is their life.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm curious, kind of going off that a little bit. I want to get into a little bit more about the Beyond Medicine group and like why you started it, because I imagine a lot of what we're talking about was kind of the impetus for that. So, like, I guess why did you start it? What are you trying to build? You graciously invited me to be a part of this community, and I thank you for that, because I've only been on it a couple of weeks, and some of the conversations have been awesome. I've had people reach out to me to be on the podcast or talk about other things. So it's really cool what you're building. So maybe tell us a little bit more about that.
Oh, that makes me happy, man. That's why I built it, really. But yeah, it's an interesting story. So in my last startup, I went to this conference called Vive, and it was in Miami, and it's a huge digital health conference, one of the biggest of the year. And I get to this conference, and I'm walking up and down the halls one day, and I'm looking around, and I'm like, man, there's like there's like hundreds of companies here, digital health companies, all like, doing all these different kinds of things. And they're building products and apps and technologies for physicians and nurses and clinical teams. And I'm like, what the hell? There's no doctors here. I'm like one of 7 doctors in this entire building. And there's thousands of people here. Right. And that absolutely blew my mind. I was like obsessed with this like thought of like, how is this even possible? So I go to Twitter or somewhere, I don't know where I posted this, and I'm like, there's a huge disconnect here between our clinical community and the digital health community, and why is this the case? Right. And it ended up going viral, and apparently a bunch of other people felt this the way too. And I was like, yeah, like I knew I wasn't the only one that thought this. I knew something was off here. And so I started really thinking about how do I, what's the solution? Like, I know there's an opportunity. I know there's a gap here. I know that there's something missing, but I don't know what to do about it. I really don't. There's 2 communities siloed in their own worlds, clinicians siloed in their clinical world, health tech builders siloed in their old world. And the way I described it was that these are 2 communities living in separate worlds that desperately need each other. all I could think of was like drawing 2 circles and a bridge.
Almost like a Venn diagram.
Yeah. And so I'm like, all right, the solution is build this bridge. What is this bridge? What does it look like? And, I started thinking about communities, and I've done this before, building communities with the podcast. And so I thought, all right, if I build let's just say a Slack community, and I bring in the clinical people and I bring in the health tech people, and I create a way for communication, open communication to happen, but also provide each community their own safe space, which is really what we created. So we created the Doctor's Lounge and we created the network. So these are 2 private communities within Beyond Medicine Group, but there's all the public channels that we have, which is the bridge, all these public opportunities for collaboration to happen. We do the coffee matching where we introduce a doctor to a health tech founder or an investor. And these happen bi-weekly. And so these conversations are going to, start happening. And really, I think that's where the opportunities happen. Because once you bring these 2 communities together and you start meeting people from a different place from where you're from and do different things than you, then that doctor with the great idea can partner with that entrepreneur with the great background, and great things can happen. And so that's really what it started off as. And then I built the website myself, and I built the community myself. I did this all in a low budget. Really didn't spend a lot of money on it. Really, this was my MVP. And I used the lean approach. Like, I didn't have to go spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to go build something. I just used the resources I had to just test something, see if it's there. And now, it's a paid group. It's $100 a year. You get enormous amounts of value out of it. And it's extremely fun. And for me, it brings me a lot of joy to be able to do that.
That's really cool. And, you would probably know better than me, but I feel like there's not much else out there for this. I mean, obviously there's LinkedIn, and, there's more and more doctors, jumping on LinkedIn and things like that. But I feel like there's 2 types of doctors on LinkedIn. There's the ones that, they have the profile and they have like 35 connections, and they post and they don't even post and they don't really do much. And then there's the other ones that are like really involved. They've got, thousands of connections, and they post, and, they've got interesting other things going on. And so I think both types of doctors would benefit from, because even if you're on LinkedIn, you can also kind of get lost in the crowd, like who do I reach out to? And a lot of these business people who are, obviously more savvy with networking or on some of these business platforms, they probably get so many messages and things like that. And so I think building kind of a community where people have a common interest or a common goal makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And it attracts all the right people. The most of the people that come to the group have an interest, are probably of the archetype of being innovators or interested in innovation in some capacity. It attracts certain people, right? Either I've worked in digital health, or learning about digital health, or want to become part of it. This is something they've already been thinking about. And, I've been very intentional to invite a lot of leaders that have done important things or built companies, even some physicians that have built really big companies, successful companies, because these are people we can learn from and can provide valuable resources for us. And I've really just been intentional about keeping the group filled with the right people, right? Because you want to invite everybody, you want everybody to participate, but you also want to make sure they're there for the right reasons. They're there to collaborate, they're there to contribute, and be part of a really good community. And I think some communities can get watered down by people who are not there really to help, or not there because they actually are interested in digital health or whatever. They're just there to cause a ruckus or something like that. And we want to build a good community, because I want to help everybody. I get so much joy when like you just told me, people reached out to you and, some good opportunity came from that. For me, that's what I love to hear. And that's what I love to do. And, I want to help as many people as I can get into digital health, get into the opportunities they want, because I know how soul sucking sometimes clinical medicine can be if that's the only thing you're doing. Right. And I want to help as many people as I can get into these opportunities. And just from my past experience, I know like the network it's really all about the networking. And I keep saying that over and over again, because it's the truth. It's about who you know and how do you get connected with them, and what's the process to actually close a deal.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I guess who else is your team on this? Who else is collaborating with you to help build this and bring this even further?
Yeah, so I've had a lot of good advisors that have helped me do some things and bounce ideas off of. I got to shout out Paulius. He's actually a resident, primary care family medicine resident, and he's very knowledgeable about digital health. Paulius, shout out for being I call him my consigliere. I don't know if you know the mafia hierarchy.
Oh yeah.
he's like my personal advisor. But he keeps me going in the right direction. And like, if I'm doing something that maybe isn't beneficial for the community or isn't like really that helpful, he'll be like, Rami, I don't think that's the right direction, or I think we should do this instead. And he's very honest with me about certain things, and I appreciate that a lot about him. So I think it's good to have someone like that in your corner, friends, whoever, because they'll keep you honest, and they'll keep you from, like, you just need someone that's not going to just say, yeah, this is a great idea. You want them to think about it and be like, no, I think you don't do that, or don't, that sort of thing. And then I got to shout out Cheyenne Syed. Shay, he works in health tech. He's a computer scientist and a data engineer. And he's helped me a lot with kind of like the more technical aspects of things. He built a bot for the community, like amazing.
Oh, man.
Yeah, so he's another person that's helping out. But right now, that's really I'm doing most of the running and the things in my in between time, really.
That's awesome. Well, Rami, as we come up on the hour here, I want to make sure we kind of plug all your endeavors here. So where can people find Beyond Medicine Group and get involved if they want to, and also, reach out to you and get more involved with what you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, I have to thank you, man, because you are such a good interviewer. You really are.
Thank you.
Very thoughtful questions, and the way you've kind of segued into each topic. Like, I think I need to study how you do your interviews, because really good job, really great job doing it, because I know how hard it is to be a podcast host. Mm-hmm. It's hard to think about your question and also listen and do all these things. So I got to hand it to you for doing such a great job with the questions.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Yeah. And to connect with me, LinkedIn's probably a good place. But the best place, if you really want feedback, or if you want to learn, if you want to be part of a vibrant community, Beyond Medicine Group is the place to be. And you can sign up through the website. It's beyondmedicinegroup.com. Click on community. There's a form you'd fill out, basically put in your information, and then you'll get a launch pass link, which gives you access to the group. If you're a physician, you'll get access to the doctor's lounge. So it's a private group only for physicians. We have certain integrations in there where you can actually ask anonymous questions. If there's something you're embarrassed about, or something you don't want to publicly state, or something you just really need some frank feedback about, you can post it anonymously without having to have an intermediary like Facebook groups, right? This is so much cooler because you can post your own anonymous question. You get feedback from literally hundreds of physicians that are not only physicians, but work in industry, work in digital health, CEOs of, we got some really big CEOs in the company in this group. So it's like a huge value add. And then if you're a non-physician or just, work in digital health, or an investor or a founder, you'll join the network. And once you fill out these forms, you'll get an email from me personally with the links. It's $100 for the year, super cheap. We're doing that on purpose. Just, we want to bring people in, but I think you don't value something unless you pay for it. And so we do that. I really do that just to make sure that we keep the right people in, because if you value network and you value community, then you'll put that money up front and see it as an investment in yourself. And it helps us run the group, hire a community manager, pay for the applications and integrations we do in the group. And so, beyondmedicinegroup.com, you can do, or beyondmedicinegroup.com/community. We have a form on there that you can sign up for.
Awesome. And then your podcast site, it's found on wherever podcasts are found, and it's just
Yes.
Beyond Medicine podcast. That's awesome.
Yeah, Beyond Medicine is the podcast. We have some really, really cool podcasts coming up. Two I'm really excited about. I'm not going to share one of them. That's going to be a surprise because this is a long-awaited episode. But one of I interviewed the CEO of I'm Aware. That episode will come out this week.
Oh wow!
And we'll have some more cool episodes coming soon.
That's awesome.
And I would love to have you on my podcast as well. So maybe we can trade chairs here, and I can ask you all the fun questions.
Yeah, that'd be a lot of fun. That'd be awesome. Well, Rami, I really enjoyed our conversation, and thanks for joining me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. This was a lot of fun. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the DaVinci Hour podcast, presented by DaVinci Academy. Please be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow the podcast on your podcast platform of choice to catch the latest episodes. Please leave a comment or a review and share it with a friend. Lastly, you can find all of our podcasts, video courses, and books on our website, dviacademy.com. Thank you for listening.